Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today I'm joined by one of my friends and colleagues with the American Bar Association section of dispute resolution, Gary Doernhoefer. And I'm so excited to have Gary here because he's really someone who has moved, much like me, from the legal realm of what we do into the tech realm of what we do. And he's become an entrepreneur with a fantastic new product for dispute resolution professionals, for legal professionals. And I'm very excited to bring it to you and Gary to you. So Gary, first off, thank you for joining us.
Oh, well, I really appreciate the opportunity, Susan. It's always great to talk to you.
Well, and we've talked so many times about this because I'm completely fascinated and find what ADR Notable is so helpful and what it can do for a practice. But one of the things that I've always enjoyed about talking to you is you really layer in the fact that your history, your professional journey did not start as a tech entrepreneur. You started, much as many of us did, in the legal world. So it might be helpful to my listeners to understand your journey to becoming a tech entrepreneur.
Great, thanks. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I didn't start down this path. If you had asked me where I'd be at this point in my career, I would have been miles away from where I am, in fact. So I graduated from University of Chicago Law School, went into private practice like everybody else did, in fact, with a very large Chicago-based firm as an associate in their litigation department. I was in a branch office, so I was actually in Denver, Colorado, not in Chicago. And they closed that office down after a few years. It was there mostly to do oil and gas work. And if you may remember, in the late 80s, there was an oil and gas bust. That
Yeah.
market collapsed. So instead of moving back to Chicago, I stayed in Denver for another couple of years with another firm, moved with the partner that I'd been working with, and then pursued really an interest that I'd had for quite some time, all the way back to high school. I had gotten my private pilot's license, and I said, I really would love to be more involved in the aviation industry if I had to choose, if I get to choose. And that led to a terrific job, a lot of fun. I was an in-house lawyer for American Airlines, and I spent 9 years with them total, 7 in headquarters, and 2 more assigned to their government affairs office in Washington, D.C. And from there, then my sort of tech and entrepreneurial experience got started in 2000. What was then the 5 big airlines, there aren't 5 big ones anymore,
Yeah.
joined together and created Orbitz, the travel website. And as that was being assembled, a management team was being assembled, I was recruited to be the general counsel initially for Orbitz. So even though it had a lot of backing from the airline industry, we started like a startup. I mean, we were in leftover office space from Boston Consulting Group in a Chicago high-rise with disassembled carrels lying outside the door of my office on the floor. And that was a great job and a really interesting trip. The company was under antitrust scrutiny from day one because of its ownership. That had been one of my specialties at American Airlines, so I was the logical fit, and we got it. We took it through the antitrust division's 3-year investigation successfully. Then we went public, and within a year, there was a tender offer acquisition by Senate Corporation. So after that, I actually took a quick year hiatus because my wife is an academic, and it coincided with her academic sabbatical. But when I came back to the United States, then I did a startup company with the colleagues from Orbitz around a credit card fraud solution for online merchants. And
Mm-hmm.
that company, we built that right through the recession in 2007, 2008, and sold it to American Express Corporation in 2010. I then returned my more aviation roots and was the general counsel for the International Air Transport Association. And I moved to Canada, based in Montreal, split headquarters in Geneva, and did that for 3 years and got a lot more global experience. Living apart from my family, though, so at the end of that 3-year period, I moved back home, basically, which is Columbus, Ohio. And that's when I got started with ADR Notable. I was interested in the airline industry adopting more a greater use of ADR. If you go into the thought process about when to use ADR, it like touches all the buttons, right? It's technical,
Yes.
it's long-term contracts, sometimes monopoly suppliers like airports. I mean, there's all the good reasons. Rarely is it helpful to be have those disputes in the public eye. I mean, it's on and on. And I got connected with the really spectacular faculty at Ohio State University because of my home near Columbus. And that led to taking a course in mediation skills. And I finished the 3-day course taught by Josh Stuhlberg, terrific professor, and said to myself, one, you're not temperamentally well suited to be a mediator. You just don't have the patience. I admire the skill set, but I don't think that's me. But I did realize how little mediation had adopted technology of any form. There is still yellow legal pads and note taking and mishmash of various technology tools. So that launched my desire to build something to assist mediators. That seemed like the best way I could contribute to the industry based on some of my prior entrepreneurial experience.
Yeah, and I love that because it sort of mirrors your experience right there with mediators and their adoption of technology. So mirrors my experience as someone who years ago sort of shifted to the online virtual world and said to my colleagues, "Hey, the water's great, come join me," and got this kind of tepid, you know, not so sure we want to
Right,
try that.
right.
And I think it's interesting, or something that my listeners should note, is ADR Notable, as we talk about what you've built here, which is so wonderful. It had its origins long before COVID really
Oh,
came
absolutely.
along. I think just as the virtual mediation platforms and approach to mediation and dispute resolution that I am immersed in, ADR Notable has gotten a huge bump of
Right.
notice, perhaps, in the field because we are entering that world of technology. But let's talk about first, because when you first showed me ADR Notable, from that concept of helping mediators do what they do, but do it better by using technology, I jumped up and down. I said, this is that missing link, or that missing piece that hasn't existed for us, that brings so many things together. So I think, we've talked about the journey. Let's talk about what ADR Notable is. I want to hear your description. I know mine, but I want to hear
Right.
yours.
Well, I can kind of go back a little bit into the history, because the thing that attracted me right away, and the very kernel of this, was note taking. I did this practice session, as I said, with Josh Stuhlberg, and I found myself with notes where I had issues on page 1 and 2, and then I got a proposal that addressed those issues on page 4 of my notes, and trying to associate those issues with that proposal and keep track of what we'd agreed and which issues were now resolved and off the table. On a yellow legal pad, just struck me as kind of crazy in this era that we're still doing it that way. So the very kernel of ADR Notable was a better way to take notes during a session. And my thought was, if you could put them down on a computer, you can move them around, you can put them in a different order, you can link them across types of note, an issue with a proposal, and then you can move that agreed proposal right into drafting your final agreement or your summary of the terms, whichever you want to do. So that was the nugget where we started. But we quickly looked at it and said, that's not enough of a solution for anybody to get anybody all that excited. What we really need to do is back up now and look at the entire business process flow, step by step by step, and say, how can we help? How can we help during intake of a new client, capturing that information, file management or document management as you build and you get documents from the parties, and then into scheduling, and we use checklists to help ensure that you remember to do everything, or if you put a file down for a week and pick it up again, you can look at your own checklist to see where you left off. So we've tried to really sit down with mediators and hear the business process. And what you note when I talk about this, we're not trying to engage ourselves in the mediation skills at all. That is, we believe, uniquely the world of mediators and the human communication, building trust, using empathy. We can't help that. We can take care of all of the other business components that are inescapable when you're our mediator, and we can help with those. And we try as much as we can to stay out of the way of that human communication, even in the way we design the note taking, which we expect to take place in real time in the room.
Right. And that's what I love about ADR Notable is you have taken all of the different aspects of the practice and the process. So when I say practice, it's the practical stuff. It's the things like the intake, getting client information, tracking your time spent with them, the things that you're doing for them, your communications with them, all of that aspect. Then the actual mediation process itself, the note taking, the structure of your mediation, the agenda, the drafting of documents for them, the sharing of information, the storing of information, and you have put all of that in one place. So essentially you open up your screen and it's sort of your practice is there in front of you.
That is exactly the goal. And the way we went about this is we paid a company to build a prototype based on our thoughts about what mediators needed. But then we took that prototype, which just is a cheap way of doing this. It mimics actual software. So you can just show the idea to people. But we took that out in the first stage, earliest stage of the company, and showed it to over 30 mediators and sat down with them and did interviews and talked in detail about what they needed. We also learned that not everybody works the same way. There's a wide range of approaches, even to these business components. So we had to be flexible. So we had to build a lot of flexibility into the system to allow people to do things their own way, but still be helpful. And that all came out of that heavy research at the front end before you start committing to building the final tool. And that's how we got that kind of depth and breadth to the product in the end, is just a lot of hard work at the front end to try and understand what was needed and what would be helpful.
Right. Well, and you point out something that I think is so exciting about tech startups in the legal space or in the dispute resolution space. My friend Simon Bomey was on the show last season, and we were talking about the fact that in this area, so many of the tech startups do exactly what you did. They went to the professionals to get the input from the ground up, so that the product got built out, the platform gets built out to work for us, for what we need. And I think that's why when people who are listening right now go and look at ADR Notable and the functionality from start to finish of what's there, that's why I got excited. And I think that's why they will get excited. This will look like something that you can immediately start using in your practice that is going to make your life and the experience of your clients better. And
Yeah.
it's because you built it for us. And you
Right.
continue to tweak it. I do want people to understand that as well. You built it from the ground up. And you mentioned to me earlier, there's things in the pipeline that are coming that are additional enhancements.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, we had the primary product built by an outside contractor, software development firm. And when they completed their basic product, we sort of said, thank you very much. Good job. Goodbye. And we've now hired our own team of internal software developers so that we can listen and react more rapidly to new input from users than we could when it was an outsourced product, because we had to get in their queue for all their other projects. Now we have our own team of developers who do this day in and day out, as we need. So, and we have a long list of things we'd like to improve. It's a brand new product. It's been out for a couple months. It went through an extensive period of testing, so it's reliable and stable. But there are things we can do better, and we continue to listen, and we continue to make everything from label changes on a button to new features on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, well, I mentioned to you, I just previewed it for some of my colleagues. I'm doing a program for AAA right now on advanced online mediation skills and techniques. And we did a little preview, and I did that for my colleagues who are the other trainers in that program. And all of them got all excited to see this and wanted to know more. So one of the things I want to do is sort of hone in, because you do have so many features, but I do want to sort of hone in because I think it will sort of bring home for those who are listening how this functionality can be so helpful. So let's hone in on that note-taking portion, because it's, you know, my description of it. So you have a lovely description that's very technological, and I jump in with it's like using sticky notes on a board. But
Right.
I think that really makes a good analogy so that people can visualize this in their mind, since they're hearing this audibly or they're just watching this on a video. When you are doing the note taking on the platform on ADR Notable, you have columns that you can head, you know, it could be facts, issues, proposals, conclusions. You can head them up any way you want. And you can add these little note cards. I call them my sticky notes, and they can start here. And you can, instead of like you were talking about on a yellow pad, where it might be on page 1 and page 4, you might have the facts on page 1, a proposal on page 3, and a conclusion or agreement on page 4. So you end up ripping up your pages or doing arrows. I did the arrows a lot. I was a big arrow and circler and numberer and all that. You can actually move things around right on the screen. It's almost like having a whiteboard in front of you where you move all your sticky notes around.
Right.
And I will tell you, in an online process, this is even more helpful because you can actually put that up through screen share and the clients can see it. And I'm going to tell you all right now, my clients love it, because they can go, oh, take that sticky note, Susan, and move it over there because we've agreed on that. Or I guess I would go to the third sticky note down and make a change on that to say this. So
Right.
let's talk about that note taking, because I think it's just so helpful.
Well, we started out, trying not to make it look very different than the way we were told some mediators or many mediators take their notes. Because as I said, the goal was not to make a huge leap and make people change the way they do things. So as you mentioned, we structured it many mediators we talk to say they use a column structure. So we just adopted that. We based it initially off of Josh Stuhlberg, his book, and then we realized it had to be very flexible. So in his book, he has mediators listen for issues, proposals, facts, and principles. And so we used an initial 4-column structure. But as you said, you can change that, because we heard many mediators say, no, I use husband, proposals, wife, or plaintiff, proposals, defendant, or I just use one big thing and I sort it out later. And all of those are possible. You can eliminate columns for while you work and just take notes, or you can leave them in and sort the notes into the columns really easily as you go. And you can attribute it to who said it. So there's a system for either all on your keyboard or using your mouse, or if you have a touchscreen with your finger, you can identify who said it, what kind of note it is, issue, fact, proposal. And all the notes are entered into one little window, and intentionally the window's at the top of the screen, because as you said, we were doing this pre-COVID. We thought it would be in the room, and we intentionally put that at the top of the screen so that your eye movement between the people in the room and your computer would be minimal.
Right.
As opposed to looking down all the way at a flat item on the tabletop. And then, so you do a short note, you can attribute it, you can categorize it, and then it goes into the note board, the columns, as soon as you hit return. And from there, as you said, you can drag and drop it. It's on a little card, and we actually call them cards. And you can just click on it with your mouse or touch it with your finger. And you can, let's say you've been talking to the parties for a couple hours, and you've got a list, kind of an agreed list of 6 or 7 items that are issues. And now the mediator can say, okay, they didn't come out in the order I think we ought to attack them. I'm going to put this one first. I'm going to drag it to the top of the column, and we're going to go in this order. You can resort those in a split second, because it's just drag and drop. And then you get a proposal, drag that issue and drop it on top of the language that you've typed for the proposal, it stays in the issue column, but now it's linked and you can see the link. So then you can work in your proposals column and build these things up. You can do counter proposals, and it keeps track of what the original one was and what the new one looks like. And as you get agreement, you click a little icon for a thumbs up, which I'm sure is what your clients love, right? They're all working
Yes,
for
they
those
do.
thumbs
They
up,
love
right?
the thumbs up. Hit the
Um,
thumbs up. Hit the thumbs up, Susan.
and as soon as you get the thumbs up, it actually puts a check mark back in anything you link to it so that you know, okay, those issues have been addressed. I can get them out of the way. And when I do my practice sessions, I drag those out of the way. Literally, I just put them down at the bottom so that the issues that haven't been addressed now are at the top of my column. And then you can move, and then other things are going on the note board. Timers keep track of your time in session or in caucus. And when you're in caucus, your notes go into the note board softly blurred to remind you that they're confidential. If you get the waiver and the confidentiality is removed, you just remove the blur,
Right.
and they're still visible. They're visible if you hover over them, but you can also permanently remove the blurring. But then as you progress and you build and you get agreements, you get these thumbs up, then you can just go to the next stage, which takes your notes of the agreed terms and puts them into a more useful text editor, where you can then build your actual summary of the agreement or final terms if you're actually drafting the final summary agreement, final settlement agreement. But you can, the goal is you don't have to retype anything. You don't have to start over. Whatever the parties worked on in terms of getting that statement in your notes of the agreed terms, you start from that in the next step. So you save yourself a lot of time and energy, and it looks seamless to your clients. And as you say, you can share this process at any point, and they can participate just in a
Right.
whiteboarding session.
Well, and that's critical for people to understand with our virtual world now. One of the things that is so helpful, I think, for people and practitioners, but also clients, is that what you were just describing. So now you've gone through your mediation session or sessions, and you have in those notes, on those sticky notes or in those note cards, you have agreements that then, as a part of the ADR notable process, get transitioned over into a starter document, I'll call it,
Right.
where you also have the ability to have your boilerplate already ready to go and select from. Maybe you might have different openings, or you might have different types of matters. You
Yep.
can start building out that agreement or term sheet, or whatever that will be helpful,
Yep.
so that your process doesn't get interrupted by, okay, we'll take a break now, or we'll end this session and I'll draft something and get it out to you all. You can actually keep it going and start creating very seamlessly, because half the work's already been done and a
Right.
lot of it can be preloaded. And I think that's critical, especially in our virtual world, where people are no longer sitting around at a table. Will you hand off documents to a paralegal or an assistant to go start drafting something up? This
Right.
needs to be done in the moment, and you can.
And in fact, you can do it in two ways, because one is you can go work on that language that is your settlement, the terms of the actual agreement you just reached. You can edit those, you can adjust them, you can get them all ready in one section of that term sheet editor. And then you can just, with one click, it copies everything in that box. Then you go open your Word document that is your really detailed boilerplate, that has choice of venue clauses and force majeure clauses and all of that stuff. And you just paste it in and you're done. Alternatively, if you're building something a little less formal, we have 3 boxes, and you can paste in if you've saved clauses you like. So let's say you have a standard preamble for a document that is a summary but is not intended to be the binding terms yet, right? Okay, so you have your preamble, and as you work in the term sheet editor, you can just click and it pastes that pre-saved clause into the top of your document. Then you put in your agreement terms that moved over automatically from the last stage. Then you go to the next section and you put in, parties bear their own costs, or what's the process we're going to follow from here. Again, you go to your library of clauses that you've saved before, you pick and choose in seconds, drag them in, and it assembles right in front of you a digital document that's formatted, ready to be saved as a PDF, all the way down to the ability to sign it if you're in person, and finish it without ever using a single piece of paper.
Right. Well, and I just want to, you hit the point where I think heads are really going to explode, because you just mentioned they can even sign the document within the program.
Right.
You said in person, but what you mean is if they're physically present virtually, they do not need to be in person in the room.
Right. Either
This
way.
is an e-signature situation where
Right.
not only did you just do the mediation or dispute resolution process, create a document, but right there within the program, people can also get digital signatures.
Correct. You can finish it right there, and be done. And like I said, never use a single piece of paper.
Right. So, and that for a virtual process, as we've also moved to this online world, even though you didn't create this program for the digital or virtual mediation process, it has taken everything that we need to do and put it into digital virtual
Right.
means, so that you can run your entire virtual mediation or your mediation in person right there from the computer. I think you said you wanted originally to bring the computer in the room, and then I said, and now the computer is the room.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, as we built it, don't be so modest, Susan. We knew about you.
Yeah.
We knew that there was a clear movement in the direction of what you had been doing for years, and that you were at the forefront of that movement to use online mediation as a viable tool. As you know, it exploded with COVID-19, but
Right.
you were already out there, and the movement was already well situated. And we asked ourselves at each step as we built this product, while we intended it for in-person mediation, we always asked ourselves, and how would this work in the virtual environment? So you had your influence on our product even before the world shifted and it became a critical element.
But I was following in the footsteps of the Colin Rules and the Ethan Cashes, and so many people have been talking about this for years. But that's why when I saw what you were doing with ADR Notable, I got so excited, because when I started trying to do what I do digitally or virtually online, I had to cobble things together. I had to get practice software. I had to have e-signature software. I had to have document production, drafting software. Everything had to be, something that I was making up. Whereas you have taken it all and put it in one place for us. It makes such a difference.
I described that. You're exactly what you're describing. We saw all the time, right? Everything from note taking, where we heard people talking about using shading and colored pencils and columns and arrows and initials, and just a crazy panoply of stuff, and then to their practice. It was the same thing again. They were using Excel spreadsheets and Word and video or not video conference yet, a lot, and sometimes just telephone conference software. And sometimes they would have Asana or some of these other things that were not built for purpose. And then of course they would have to have billing, and then they added video conferencing. And I described that as the sock drawer syndrome. I mean, it was the sock drawer of software, right?
Yes.
And it was organized about as well as my sock drawer. And the goal for us was to try and say, look, let's get all of those functions that they have to do. They have to track contact information. They have to have access to email, to a calendar. They have to be able to preserve documents connected to a case. They need to be able to take notes and keep those in the case, and create a final settlement agreement, get to the very end and delete certain things like their notes and documents they receive. All of these steps require, in the old days, different solutions. We tried very hard, and we're still working at it, getting it right, but we're putting it all in one place. So when you're a mediator, you can use one piece of software.
which
And do.
I think is going to change the practice for so many of us, and allow us to consolidate not only all those programs, but not insignificantly the cost of having to access all those programs. And I know that's going on in my listeners' heads because they're sitting there thinking, well, sure, this sounds great, but this must cost a fortune. This must be, a practice tool, but outside my reach. So let's just, jump in on that because
Sure.
your pricing is extremely reasonable. And I want people to know that.
Right. So we're about to go out with our launch pricing at $29.99 a month. That is an unlimited number of cases. And it includes, if you have an assistant or a case manager, they do not need to buy a separate license to be able to interact with your cases. So it's one-time license at $29.99. We do know that there are some mediators who only mediate cases very infrequently, and we don't want to leave them out. They're not inclined, I'm sure, to buy a monthly subscription if they're, say, a practicing lawyer and they're only asked to mediate 3 times a year. So we do have per case pricing also. So you can buy just one case for $19.99. And then if you're in a firm, and we do have features that help you administer a firm of mediators. So people can assign cases to others, and you can keep track of your whole, all of the work that's being done within a firm. You can still keep security guard or access guides between mediators, so they can't see one another's cases. There is a firm library so that you can share documents across materials across the members of the firm, as well as the library within each case. So if you have a firm, you should just contact us, and we'll negotiate an enterprise license that'll be reasonable and fit people's budgets, I think. But it is, we are trying to sort of just get out there, and we do let everybody try it out for free for a month with no obligation. We don't even take your credit card at that stage like some places do. So you can literally try it for free for a month. And if you get into it, even if you choose not to go forward with it, we let you just continue the case you opened during that month until it's concluded, and then we'll close it down after that.
Which is, actually how I started with one case. And, I honestly, you'll get hooked very quickly with this. The other thing I want people to understand, just because I know so many of us have a little bit of tech fear. It's a very intuitive, because it's things like drag and drop and colors. And you've come up with, shortened, like you can do a hashtag with initials, and that will bring up the person's name, or the at. I mean, you've come up with shortcuts and all different kinds of things. There's a small learning curve in learning how to use them, but because it's intuitive, you really fall into the flow of using it. I will tell you all this, for me, very, very quickly, where for me, it becomes, you want to be using things where you're not thinking constantly, oh, wait, how do I have to do that? And this is that type of, you've made it so simple that you easily fall into the flow of where it's just like you're picking up a pen and writing a note, but you're doing it through your keyboard. So I want people to understand that it's, yes, as with anything, there will be a small learning curve, but you have also managed to make it very accessible.
I just get the biggest kick. We've done a lot of work with law students. Yep. And I mean, you would talk about intuitive. Law students, first of all, they never read the directions, right?
No, neither do lawyers and other professionals, trust me.
And it is so much fun to watch them. And then you find people, I mean, if you've used email and sort of any of these sort of products that we're all using, as we said at some point, if you can type an email, you can take a note in ADR Notable, because it's far less complicated than that. You did raise one other point that's interesting too, is with the new, the latest version of the operating system for iPad, you now can skip the keyboard and you can handwrite your note into our product in the note entry window. And the newest version of the operating system for Apple translates that into typed text for you. And you can just then take your stylus and tap these buttons to say, oh yeah, that's this, Susan Guthrie said this and it's an issue. And so it's handwrite, tap, tap, and you've got the note into our system.
So even for our old school folks who like to do everything by hand and take written notes, it's going to fold in. So
it is
you know,
seamless. It is seamless.
it
And I
truly is something to
hats
try.
off to those guys because they
Yeah.
did it. They created that, and we just said, "Holy cow, it works in our app without our touching a thing." Handwrite your note in the note entry window, and it goes right into our system. Yeah.
So I just want everyone to go try it. If you're listening to me now, do me a favor, just go to adrnotable.com and give it a try. I'll be sure to put all of the links and notes regarding Gary's offer of a 3-month trial membership to ADR Notable for all Learn to Mediate online listeners in the show notes. So go take a look there and try it out now.